This is going to be the second half of chapter 5 because we live in McPherson and my internet just goes out for no reason for periodic moments. So I want to finish up just a few slides for chapter 5 so you can have just a little bit of explanation with them. And there it is. Okay, so we were discussing the takings clause at the end of the first video. And the question was whether the government could tell a man and woman that wanted to expand their plumbing company if only if they added a bike path. So the takings clause prohibits a state from taking private property for public use without just compensation. So without paying a certain amount of money. The government can take your land through a thing called eminent domain. They can say, we need to take part of your land to build the interstate or to use it for some certain public good, but they have to pay you a significant amount of money to do so. There is another thing called substantive due process. So in the early part of the 1900s, the Supreme Court struck down a lot of state laws that they felt interfered with basic state rights. A lot of these had to do with, during that time, we were going through the Industrial Revolution. So the court was striking down all sorts of things about working conditions, unions, social welfare, things like that. And those were all under substantive due process. For example, in Lochner versus New York, the state created a law that limited the number of hours a baker could work. The court struck it down and said that New York couldn't make laws that affected how long a person could or could not work. So substantive due process is a form of due process that holds that certain rights are so fundamental that the government cannot eliminate them. So how long a person wants to work is a fundamental right, for example, and that's what the court is talking about in Lochner. So under the 14th Amendment, that is regarding the Equal Protection Clause. So generally, we have an idea in the United States that the government must treat people equally. However, we have lots of classifications of people, but some of them are considered unfair, and those classifications of people or corporations won't be permitted under US law. Yet, the government makes classifications every day. So we have levels of scrutiny for those kinds of classifications. They are minimal scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. So these are the ways in which a law is interpreted. So under minimal, this is regarding economic and social relations. So government actions that classify people or corporation on those issues, whether it's an economic issue or a social condition, most of the time those laws are upheld. Gender gets intermediate scrutiny, so a little bit more than economic and social. So those laws are sometimes upheld. Laws that are generally never upheld are over race, ethnicity, and our basic fundamental rights as citizens. So under minimal scrutiny, if a statute is created by a state that makes any sense at all, it's going to be valid. So for example, the New York City Transit Authority prohibited methadone users from any kind of employment. And the Supreme Court said, well, I mean, it's rational. So they were classifying a group of people, but they were classifying a group of people based on a social issue, which was drug use. And while methadone isn't necessarily illegal, people who are on methadone were probably heroin addicts. And so they were trying to keep heroin addicts that have a high tendency to relapse out of the transit authority. So the Supreme Court said, all right, seems legit. So it gets a very minimal amount of scrutiny. For intermediate scrutiny, we look at a gender issue, which was women in military schools. This happened when I was in high school, which is when the first woman was allowed into the Citadel. The court said that denying women the right to be in military schools violated the Equal Protection Clause. Gender-based discrimination requires exceedingly persuasive justification. And apparently in that case, the government was not convinced that military schools had a persuasive justification to prevent women from being in those schools. And then under strict scrutiny, any government action that intentionally discriminates against racial or ethnic minorities or interferes with a fundamental right is invalid. So under Palmore versus Sidoti, the state refused to grant custody to a mother because her new spouse was racially different than the child. So the court said, no, that's not going to work. There's absolutely no reason that should be upheld. So it violated equal protection. Regarding fundamental rights, the state of New York gave an employment preference to veterans, war veterans, who were residents of New York when they entered the military. So vets who were not New York residents had a really hard time finding employment once they got back from war. And the Supreme Court said that this violated your fundamental right to travel in the United States, and so it was struck down. So those are the only ones that I wanted to cover before the video ran out the last time. So this will be, I think, this was 30 or 40 minutes for this chapter, which I think is sufficient to get through in a class period. So we should probably just be able to cover the Constitution on Tuesday, and then cover what I would imagine is kind of an in-depth topic, but I'm not sure that we'll get through all of torts, which is chapter 6, torts and product liability. We may get to all of that on Thursday. We may not. So sometime this week, I will add in some assignment questions to cover we didn't do them for chapter 4. So we'll likely just stick to questions, some constitutional questions. So I will have those posted to Bulldog. I'll likely post them by tomorrow so that you can have the rest of the week to get those done. So, all right, if you guys have any questions while you're going through this, feel free to reach out. Thanks.